Hey everybody, welcome back to All Things MSP Live. Of course, this is the pre-show, the part of the show where we just sit here and kind of make sure everything's working before we actually start the show. It also gives kind of that 5-minute warning to everybody to make sure that everybody has a chance to connect to the show before we actually start with any good content. So I'm going to go ahead and do my normal, I make sure I mute myself on all the different channels because, that helps. But let's see. We are live on LinkedIn. Let me go ahead and add a comment. So, hey, LinkedIn. And LinkedIn comments are working. That's a beautiful thing. Facebook. Facebook comments are working. Last but not least, I forgot to switch out my keyboard. I'm using the loud keyboard. And I'm also still talking in my own ear. Okay, there. Now that's muted. Hey, YouTube. Come on. Come on. Oh, please tell me the comments are... There we go. Okay, comments are working on YouTube. Whew. You never know how these things are going to go because it's live. And, we're relying on technology, which we all know is not extremely reliable. It's our job to try and make it reliable, but, we know how that goes. Okay, so we are live on all three platforms. Comments are working on all three platforms. If you are watching us, go ahead and put in a comment. Let me know that you're here. Have a great guest tonight. It should be a lot of fun. And really, one of the main goals of this, live stream tonight is to turn you on to a new podcast that is available on our channel that I think is very relevant to the future of this channel. So we're going to talk about that and lots of other things about being in the channel and community and stuff like that. So there are a couple of people watching already. Make sure you comment. We like comments. We appreciate those. And I did everything much faster tonight. I don't know what's up with that. We still have like 2 minutes left before, the actual show starts. Am I actually getting more efficient at this? Am I going to have to come up with like a news story to cover during the pre-show? I don't know. But since we have 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and plug all the other stuff that All Things MSP is doing. So don't forget that we do have a brand new podcast. I keep saying brand new. We released our 8th episode this week, yesterday. And so lots going on there. Really good pickup with that. A lot of views, which is great. Live stream is going well. I still have several weeks worth of guests lined up for y'all. So, make sure you check us out, on Wednesday nights. And then, of course, the Facebook group is doing well. The Facebook group, by the way, is kind of where all of this started. So if you haven't joined the Facebook group, head on over to Facebook, find the All Things MSP group, sign up, because that's really where we kind of have more of the in-depth conversations. And so we want to make sure that everybody is kind of working out of the Facebook group. Of course, we try and communicate everything in the LinkedIn page as well. So you have the LinkedIn page. So if you prefer LinkedIn, if that's where you stay connected, make sure you go and follow the LinkedIn page, because then you'll get notifications of the podcast episodes dropping, the live streams coming up, all those different things. And then also, if you like the video content, including the podcast, because by the way, we record the podcast on video, not just audio. And so that's available on the YouTube channel as well, plus the reruns of this show. And I managed to spend most of those 2 minutes talking about all that. All right, so we're getting ready. We're getting close. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That went faster. Let's go. All right, welcome back, everybody. Really appreciate you guys spending your Wednesday nights here. Or if you're watching this on a rerun, that's okay too. We're okay with that. We don't mind. So we just really appreciate that you take time to be a member, be a part of the All Things MSP community. And don't forget, like I was talking about during the pre-show, we're on LinkedIn. We have a company page there. Facebook, the Facebook group is the main place where this community exists. It's kind of where it was born. So that's where we have probably the more in-depth conversations. And then, of course, we have the YouTube channel as well. And then if you're not familiar, we did just start a podcast. Well, it's been 8 weeks now. So we are on episode 8 and a lot of great content there. It varies. We have marketing content. We have business content. We had a life coach on there a couple of weeks ago. So really interesting stuff. Justin Esgar is the host of that show. I actually just get the opportunity to co-host, which is great for me because I kind of get to be more of the producer, behind the scenes kind of person, which I like doing. But that's not what we're here for tonight. Tonight, we're here to talk about a new podcast and a new group of people in the channel that not necessarily new. I shouldn't say that because it's been a while. But I think it's growing. We're getting a group of people, a lot of younger people who are more interested in the channel itself, the ecosystem, the environment, and not just the tech or the business side of things. And I really think personally that as this industry grows and evolves, that bringing those personalities and bringing that view of just the world into this is very important. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce, well, most of you probably already know her anyway, so it's not really an introduction, but welcome to the show, Morgan McBride. Hey, Morgan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem.
I'm excited to be here.
So, how are you tonight? How's things? You are in Charlotte? Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, things are good. It was a beautiful day today. I did get a little walk-in this afternoon. Took the dog out. I was thinking about bringing him into the webinar, but I figured we'd save everyone a little bit of noise in the background. But all good today.
That's okay. We do pets on this show. In quite frequently, well, I shouldn't shake the desk in the camera, but frequently my cat is laying right in front of the work like a captain, play like a pirate pillow on the couch back there. So,
Oh my God.
she is not here tonight. She's probably out on the porch because, I mean, I'm basically just on the opposite side of the state from you, right? So, same kind of weather. It's been beautiful here all day. So she's probably out on the back porch, but
Beautiful.
when
Yeah.
she's not there,
Cats
she's up
are a
here.
little, yeah, cats are a little quieter, I think, than dogs. So maybe next time I'm on, we'll bring him in. He'll be a little special
Yeah.
guest.
Well, we don't discriminate, right? And we're having fun here, so who really cares? Like if there's a
Yeah,
little bit of noise in the background. Um,
exactly.
so for those of you who don't know you, give me a little bit of an introduction and a little bit of, what you want to talk about tonight.
Yeah. So I'm Morgan. I have been in the channel for a few years now, and I want to talk about a new podcast that Kelcye Blankenship-Lackland and I started about a month and a half, I guess almost 2 months ago now, for pretty much everyone in the channel, and what it is. And, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those and just kind of give you a background on what we're doing and what we hope to do.
Yeah, and that's awesome. So your podcast and my podcast, although I should really call it Justin's podcast, because it's called the All Things MSP podcast, but Justin runs it, right? It started about the same time. So it's actually kind of cool that we've been kind of seeing each other's podcasts. And by the way, I really enjoyed, because I did get caught up the last couple of days because you were going to be on. I did get caught up, and I really think that if you are in this channel, you should be listening to this podcast. because you really need to hear and understand the points of view that are being shared, plus just really some good information, right?
Yeah.
So give me just a summary of the episodes that you guys have done so far.
Yeah. So the first one we did was a pilot just to give everyone kind of an intro. So if I don't cover enough here, you can definitely go back and listen to that. But we've talked about you showing up as authentically as you are. That was my personal favorite that we've done, just because it's a topic that really resonates with me and that I'd struggled with for a while. Another one that we talked about is actually life on the road. So our Kelcye and I are both very much kind of road warriors, if you want to call us that. And, we get all these comments about how our life is just a whole big party, essentially, but we deep dive into what life is actually like and the behind the scenes of it. And then we recently did a Star Wars episode where we talked about what did we talk about? I'm just thinking of Star Wars things right now.
Well,
But yeah, help me here. I'm drawing a blank on what we just talked about like 2 weeks
well,
ago.
the thing that really stuck out to me was the fact that, and I, because it's almost hard to tell who's talking sometimes between you and Kelcye. Um, so I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that it was Kelcye who had not seen any of the Star Wars movies except for Rogue One.
Yeah, and that doesn't even really count as Star Wars if we're talking about Star Wars. She just saw one mini portion of it. I felt betrayed that she had never seen any of the Star Wars before, because we'd been talking about doing a Star Wars episode for like since we started the podcast, because we knew that it was going to land on Star Wars Day. And so, she had brought up a couple of things. She had some quotes thrown in there from like Yoda and Anakin. And I was like, oh, like she must know it. And then I don't know if you caught the beginning of that episode where we were doing our rendition of the intro song that was
Mm-hmm.
obviously butchered. We had to record it like 10 times because Kelcye like kept going off key and not knowing it. And then that should have been my first tell to know that she has never seen Star Wars. And then she dropped that in the middle, and I honestly needed like 10 minutes to recover from it because I was so betrayed.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right, where you don't expect that in this industry as well, because
Right.
you think, well, okay, they may not be a technical person, but they at least kind of like
No
the
Star Wars.
genre. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Star
So,
Wars or Harry Potter or
Lord of the
uh,
Rings.
Lord of the Rings for sure. I can check off all those boxes. I think I'll have to do a Q&A with Kelcye on like what she has and hasn't seen.
That could be fun. Um,
That,
and the other thing, you had the episode on authenticity, which I thought was good too. And one of my favorite quotes out of that episode was, I think it was you who said, "Don't let anyone dull your shine."
mm.
And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's true. That was something, authenticity was something that I really struggled with when I came in to the space, just because I didn't feel like I fit in, because there, aren't a lot of people that look like me that are of my age and kind of in this space. Well, when I had joined, and I felt like I needed to kind of just fit into this box. And, my shine was a little bit dulled for the first, I would say, few years, until the last year or so, where I was, surrounded by people who wanted me to be me and supported me. And I just hope that other people can feel like that. Or, maybe you give it a listen and you want to start like showing off your tattoos and feel a little bit more comfortable doing that or being yourself. I think it's really important for this space to be as authentic as possible, because I think that's what everyone kind of craves from any and everyone in every aspect of life. So I really hope that more people start to, shine a little bit brighter.
Yeah, and I think kind of mainly because this community is a little bit smaller, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody has always kind of not been afraid of showing their personality. Now tattoos, colored hair, that's come along a little bit more recently. But I think it's great, right? Because I think we all can, express our individuality in that way. And, Des is, a really good friend of mine in the channel. And I know you guys, talk about her and kind of look up to her, in the podcast and such. And I really think that it's great that we are really integrating that into the community. Not just
Yeah.
the industry so much, but more the community, the relationship side of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, that is a huge thing that I didn't know coming into this, was how much the community was going to mean to me. And I feel like it's really, I know I've grown, but I feel like the community has grown so much in the last few years as well, where we're all very involved in each other's lives and we're very supportive. And we just, I don't run into a lot of negative people that are trying to tear people down, and I hope that that never happens. But this community is something really, really special that I don't think a lot of people get outside of this space.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of years when I was in this space, right? Working as an MSP, but I wasn't connected to the community. So I didn't get that until it was really the last 3 years of me being an MSP when I started going to shows and I started to understand the community and I started to really network with my peers. Did I understand the power of what can go on, in the community? Speaking of
Yeah.
community, we have comments.
Wow.
So, so Keith is here as usual. So Keith, thanks for being here. So Keith says, so I should not be ashamed of being well over 168 years, not too smart, and aimlessly wandering in my life. So first of all, I'm pretty sure you're not 168, Keith. I won't
Yeah.
comment on the not too smart part. Um, but I also know that you are absolutely not aimlessly wandering. Okay. So, a lot of us are jealous of the business that you've built, and it really is something to be proud of. So don't sell yourself short. Um, and then Keith also says, some of us have no personality. What should we do? Yeah, because Keith J. Nelson has no personality.
I could tell by that comment that he had no personality at
Yeah.
all.
Well, I've been lucky enough to know Keith for a little while now and hang out with him at a bunch of shows. He definitely has a personality. So I'm not
Good
going to
job.
let him off the hook on that one. All right. So I do have a couple of questions just so that we can, get to know more about Morgan. Um,
Sure.
and this kind of is going to go back, kind of your beginnings in the channel. So how did you find out that this channel even existed?
So funny, I've actually known about the channel for 25 years or so without knowing about the channel. So my dad has been in IT for 25 years. And as a kid, you were always asking your dad, like, what do you do for work? And he had tried to explain it because he was a sales engineer for Cisco for a while. And that just went over my head for probably 15, 20 of those years. So I'd always kind of known about it. And my dad had been convincing me like my senior year of college, where he was like, you should look into this industry and try to get into it, make your degree something that's going to fall in here, like do cybersecurity. And I really didn't listen to him. So it took about like 5 years or so, when I had applied to nursing school and I didn't get in, to reroute and like look at what I wanted to do. So he had introduced me, he showed me a job listing for a channel company here, and I had applied, and somehow I got in, and it's been like that ever since. And I really can't imagine a better space. Like I don't think I'll ever leave if I have the option because it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out, right? Like I got into this just because I like tech. I liked messing around with computers as a kid. I got a computer engineering degree, and I've always kind of been a little entrepreneurial. So that's how I got into it.
Hmm.
But as I got into it more and more, I instead of just selling my MSP and moving on to something else, I actually ended up being a vendor in the channel and just switching which side of the channel I was on. And um,
Hmm.
I agree with you. Like I would never leave this channel. This is home.
Yeah.
Um, when I retire, I hope to be giving back to this channel full time. As part of what I'm doing, and that's just you know
We'll start, yeah, we'll start a GoFundMe so we can fund all of the trade shows that you're going to go to throughout the year when you're retired for
there you
free.
go. Well, I'm hoping that maybe I can do some consulting so we don't have to do the GoFundMe, um, which is great. Uh, Keith is commenting some more. Keith is very involved, by the way, in community stuff, not just in the channel. A lot to do with disabilities and special needs community. Just so everybody's aware, Keith is really, really involved with that kind of stuff, and it's really part of just his DNA, I think, to be involved with community and help people out. And so, Keith, if I don't say it enough, I really do appreciate you being a part of this community. And unfortunately, your comment is so well. You know what? I'm going to try anyway. Let's see if I can add it to the broadcast. I can. It actually all of the text that you typed showed up. So thank you for that. I really again, we're talking about community. We appreciate everybody who gets involved. All right, so that leads me to what was your first channel job?
Yes. My first role, its official title was a partner identification manager, which sounds very fancy, but the more common term is like a business development rep or a sales development rep. So, a lot of cold calling, a lot of emailing, a lot of LinkedIn messages to people I didn't know right away. And I honestly think that's like a really great foundation that I set on like how to get out of my comfort zone and be able to talk to people without any background at all, just start a conversation. Um, and, are you familiar? I'm assuming that everyone's familiar with like a sales development and business development rep role, but do you know like what, in essence, like what it does?
So for me, because I'm on the vendor side of things and I actually run a team that is very similar to an SDR team, I do. But for the rest of the audience, especially for MSPs that may not have a larger sales organization, it's an important role to know because somebody needs to be doing it in your business. So go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. So, there was the cold calling and everything that goes into it, but I was responsible for building out a pipeline for our AEs. So, having conversations with MSPs and finding, any pain points with their current solution or lack of, and being able to spark a little bit of interest to be able to give them, get them over to the AEs and have them have a conversation about whether or not the product was going to be a fit. It is a very, very important role. I used to call it like the receptionist of a restaurant or the front desk person at any like large building. Like you're the first impression that's made and you are letting the right people in and getting them where they need to go. So it was it's a very hard role for some people, but it's a very important role to have. And I think everyone should kind of start at some point like that because you learn a lot about people and everything.
You do. As a matter of fact, when I took over this new team, I kind of made a point because I hadn't done sales in a while.
Hmm.
So I actually made a point to actually go in and do some of the work, make some of the calls, do some of the meetings before I handed it off to the team because it isn't it first of all it's important
Hmm.
and there's a right way and well It's a big spectrum. There's a wrong way. There's definitely wrong ways to do it. There's nothing that's specifically right, but there are, things that make it more effective and
Mhm.
things like that. And so I wanted to make sure that I understood exactly what people were saying when you got them on the phone, what their questions were, what their objections were, things like that. Because even though you're not selling per se, you're not selling the product, you are trying to sell a meeting in most cases,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And that's funny that I'm glad that you did that because I made a point when I had moved into a managerial role at that first company I was at where I managed the BDR team. And when new people would come on in AE roles or growth roles, I would have them be a BDR for a week. I'm like, you're going to make cold calls and you're going to, set as many meetings for yourself or for whoever. And you're going to learn like what it's like in this role so that you can understand, the next step of AE and then GM and wherever you're going to go. So I'm glad that you did that. I hope that more businesses start to do that because it really does open up your eyes as to like what that first interaction is like with an MSP
Yeah.
or the client.
And Keith says some of us are good at sales because we suck at sales. And actually, so on the MSP side of things, I actually believe there's a lot of truth to that because in my personal experience, I was much more effective in my sales when I was consultative rather than when I was being what we think of as a more traditional sales type attitude, right?
Like ABCs.
Yes. Always be closing.
Yes.
I mean, you do like there is a certain amount of you need to be consistent. Sales is a numbers game, right?
Yeah.
In order for an SDR to have success, they have to make a certain number of phone calls because they're going to get a certain number of no's before they get a yes. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a numbers game. And it's consistency. It's a lot like starting a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
To bring it back to that, or starting a YouTube channel, or being good at social media, consistency matters.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
all right. I think next. Well, I have a good one next, but I also have a tickle in my throat. Um, so, because I think this is interesting, because this one to me, kind of hits home, because I am a 50 something, okay,
Mm-hmm.
who really likes content creation. I've got a YouTube channel, I've got a podcast, I do a lot of video. I've been doing the social media thing for a while now, and I enjoy it. But I know that a lot of people my age didn't grow up with this, so it's not default. Is it easier for you, for someone who's grown up with it, more or less, or at least in your adult years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's easier for you to, be on social media and be a content creator than it is for somebody that is maybe in my generation?
So my first immediate thought was absolutely. Like I think that we have a huge advantage, but I'm going to take that back because when I really think about content creation, it comes down to creativity in my eyes. And between Kelcye and I, like Kelcye is way more creative than I am. And she has the ability to write really well and come up with really good ideas. And so for her, who has a couple of years, she's actually a little bit older than me. She has grown up with social media as well. It comes naturally. But I would say you two are neck and neck with like the ability to be able to do it. I do think that we have a little bit of an advantage just on like the uses of it because like we have grown up with it and we can see the results from being consistent again on social media and like what it can come from. But I do really think that it just comes down to being creative and like yes, you do have to learn a new platform, but they're all kind of the same at some point. There's a little enter your text box and then an enter box. Like that's all you got to figure out and you're able to do it. But I would say, like, depending on where you're at, like if you don't have years of experience with it, we probably do have a little bit of leverage for sure. Just because it's something that, like, I remember I was really young, but I did have a MySpace. So I've been on it since I don't know what year that even was. It's been a while. I could probably still bust out my MySpace, be able to develop like a whole website based on that. I don't know if you remember the MySpace days where
I
you had
do.
like you had your own like what was it? It was like the music, like your top songs and your best friends and everything. That was where, yeah, that's where it all began.
That's where it all started. And honestly, I actually did have a MySpace page. And I mean, we're talking, what, mid 90s?
Yeah, I was like 2000s, but still. It's like if you had a
Well, maybe,
MySpace, you're good. You're good. You know technology today.
sorry, I'm kind of counting children and figuring out where we might have
Mm,
been in kids about that. So it was probably later 90s, early 2000s, now that I think
hmm.
about it, in terms of, because that's how I relate time now, is, how old
Kids.
my kids were and which ones were that old back then.
Yeah.
So, um, I, and I kind of agree. I think you have an advantage, but I also don't think it's an advantage that can't be overcome.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say on my part, it's been work, right?
Hmm.
Like to keep up with multiple, not podcasts, multiple posts per day, a live stream every week, and a podcast every week is a daunting task.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I don't get a lot of sleep is what it boils down to. But, I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that this is one of the strengths that Kelsey has over me a little bit more, where she kind of thrives and loves to do like the creation around it. And a fun fact is that we swap off every week on like who does this, who owns this part. So some weeks she'll own the socials, some week I will. We do own our like own LinkedIn and Facebook posts, but it usually will fall on one of us. And for me, when it comes down to like making sure I got a post on Facebook that I've written out, I've written a description for the podcast, I've got one on LinkedIn, I've got one for my personal LinkedIn and Instagram, and then stories lined up. I'm like, this is exhausting. I need a day off, like after I've done all of this. And that's just me. Like, it's a whole job in like one sitting, which sounds so silly, but it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, you have to be dedicated to it. Basically, a lot of the stuff that, because for me, like the editing is fun, doing
Hmm.
these live streams, like being on here now for me is fun. The
Yeah.
podcasts are always a riot because we always end up laughing.
Yeah.
Um, the podcast episode that just dropped yesterday, we had this whole thing about liquid death, um, which was only a little bit of the conversation made it into the podcast because we really wanted to focus on the marketing piece of it. But we go off on these tangents because the podcast
I
is
was
only is like a half hour long, right?
Yeah.
But
I was going to ask if you have to cut out a lot of your content because you're having conversations like that.
we do. We usually record for about an hour, and it ends up being about a half an hour long.
Okay. That's pretty
So
much the same for us. We talk
yeah,
for a really long time. We go off topic far too many times throughout it that I have had to start writing up a talk track for Kelsey and I where I'm like, we have to cover these things. Like we got to make sure we get it back to where we were.
well, it's important that because you guys are, you're not just getting on the podcast and talking about whatever. You're talking about actual relevant topics, the authentically you and the life on the road pieces, really provided some good information and to make sure that you get through all of that content, you have to kind of sketch it out in an outline. Obviously, you don't write it all out, but you do want to at least sketch it out in bullet points so that you don't get to the end of the podcast and go, oh, we forgot to talk about, these two things.
Yeah. Our first episode that we had recorded, we actually recorded, I think it was either 2 or 3 times because we kept forgetting like main points that we wanted to talk about, like who we are, what we're doing. I think we completely missed that on the first one. And so I was like, all right, we're going to start with our bullet points of what we want to cover. And that's going to be our, I don't want to say script, but our bulk of like the episode topic,
Right.
Do you have to do that for yourself or?
So for the podcast, not so much. For my YouTube videos, yes. I guess for the podcast, it's because we're recording for so long that we naturally, I think we end up covering everything that we want to cover. But yeah, it's very interesting how it can easily get away from you and how, what you record doesn't necessarily get into the final cut. For those of you who know, Keith has a daughter in the movie and TV industry, and she spent 5 days shooting an episode of The Office and ended up being on it for about 5 minutes. Very similar thing. My 3 older kids were in Dolphin Tale. But, and they were there for days, but you could barely catch them. Like it's just a blur on the screen kind of thing. But, yeah.
Keith, I want to know what episode your daughter was in. Kelcye and I are big Office fans, so I'm sure that I could find it. I will find the episode. So let me know.
So maybe an Office themed episode of the podcast coming up.
Well, so I don't think we've told anyone this, so I will do a big reveal here. Our podcast, we had gone through a few different names for a while and we couldn't figure out like what we wanted to call it or what we wanted to do. And I was watching The Office one night and it was the episode. Have you watched The Office before? Like, do you know it pretty well?
I don't know it very well, no.
Okay. So I'll give a little bit more detail. So Oscar is one of the accountants on the show and he's kind of a know-it-all. In this episode, they were talking about how they call Oscar actually in the office because he always chimes in, and when he's correcting people, he'll be like, actually, that's not the square root, or actually, that's not what she was wearing that day. And that is where the name Actually a Podcast came from.
Interesting.
So there you go. We'll have a little quiz one time, and that will be whoever gets it, I'll give you a high five or something.
So Keith came back and said that she was Toby's date for Phyllis's wedding.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. That's pretty funny. He met her at the gym.
And then his youngest is on Dance Moms, if you watch that.
I haven't watched it in a while. Was it when, what's her name was still on it? Abby?
No.
Oh, well.
And then he also said that, and I don't know which daughter this is, but she was also the waitress in the Hub on that 70s show. So
that's cool.
A lot of high profile, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And I know for a fact that he's a proud papa because he talks about them a lot.
I'd be proud. Those are pretty cool.
So I know, we kind of said that we were going to not go all the way till 8:00 tonight. Yeah. So, but I do, I think there's still some stuff to kind of dig out here. And one of the ones I was interested in is, why did you guys start the podcast?
Are you talking logistically, like why a podcast, or are you talking like why actually a podcast, like the topic and everything? Because there's different answers.
So honestly, now you made me interested in both. Because yes, I think that it's important to talk about why you chose podcast as the platform,
Hmm.
because I think that's relevant to MSPs who are thinking about using podcast as an advertising thought leadership type of platform. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's attack it from that point of view, and then we'll go to the other.
Okay, I'll make it short and sweet. So we had a webinar series last year that we'd been doing, and it was owned by my previous company. And I liked to do the webinar series. Like I like to be face to face and feel like I'm talking to someone. I just kind of realized that for me, it wasn't always beneficial to just take an hour out of my day and sit and do something. And then, maybe people were going to go back and listen, but maybe they couldn't show up live. Like just logistically, I wasn't so sure about wanting to continue to do a webinar. Um, but what I know that I do is I listen to podcasts like 24/7. So when I'm working, I've got a podcast on. When I'm going to bed, I've got my murder mystery podcast on. I'm listening to that. And I was like, I feel like there's a lot of people like out there like me that are always listening to podcasts. So why don't I do a podcast for this community where people can listen throughout the day, and it's not taking an hour to go like watch a webinar. So that's really where the podcast came in to play for us. It's
And by
just,
the way, I think the rest of the world agrees with you. I just saw a statistic today that for the first time, ad revenue for podcasts has gone over $1 billion.
whoa, that's
So
crazy.
so it is a hugely growing platform, and I think there was something in there. I don't know if it was about listenership or if it was about the ad dollars, but there was a 72% increase in some number in podcasts over the last year. So
Yeah.
it's still growing momentum. It's not Podcasts are not yesterday's news.
Right. Yeah. They're also, I feel like you can start a podcast about anything. Like whatever, I would start another podcast on like murder mysteries because I love to talk about like those kinds of things. That would be a whole another job. So we won't do that right now. But it's fun. I mean, you just talk to somebody or you talk by yourself about something you're interested in. I'm not sure if you've used like you sound like you've been able to do the editing and stuff by yourself, but Kelcye and I has a friend, his name's David Ezell. I'm forgetting his last name right now, but he has a whole little not program but pamphlet on how you can start a podcast in 24 hours, that I highly recommend anyone who wants to do it would look at, because it made it super easy for us.
Well, what you'll have to do is you'll have to get me that link so that I can put it in the show notes, so
Yeah,
people can look down in those comments or down in the description for that.
I
Okay,
sure.
so the personal reasons
Yes.
for starting the podcast.
So this also kind of goes back to the webinar series that we started last year. It was called New Kids on the Flock, and it was really geared towards new kids and new people. And I heard you mention that in the beginning, and I got a little giggle out of it, where it was for people who are trying to find their path and find their place in this space, because it's really scary, like being an early in career person and coming into this somewhat daunting space. But we've been doing it for about 6 or 7 months or so. And I had just started to think like, we're not really new kids anymore. I was going into my third year of being in this space, and Kelcye, um, like closely after that as well. And then I ended up leaving my last job, and they still owned like the webinar brand and everything. So it wasn't something I could bring with me. But all of those things kind of added up. And I was like, you know what? Like, I want to do this my way. I don't want it owned by anyone per se. Like, I want to be able to share my thoughts and my experience from where I'm at in my career, and hopefully shed some light for those that are maybe later, like in their career, like well-seasoned veterans. But also having people that just join, like if they want to know what life on the road is actually like they can tune in. Or like if you have been in this space for 20 years and you're struggling with your authenticity, then like let's talk about it and see if you can be a little bit better. So it really was just a space where we both wanted to share our thoughts and experiences, and just make this space a little bit brighter and not be super bogged down in like technical things or anything like that.
Yeah. And I, for one, truly appreciate you guys bringing the vitality and the just a different view on things to the industry. I think I'm encouraged by the fact that you guys, in what I guess doesn't seem like a short period of time, but then again kind of does for the well-seasoned people like me, and I appreciate the way you put that. Um, you know, just how quickly you guys did adopt us old people, and hopefully we also adopted you, because I feel like, to me, I'm very much into mentorship, and I really hope that, you, Kelcye, a bunch of other people, in this industry, consider me an ally, because I do want to be that. And so if anybody's out there and has questions about this, and, I urge you to check out, Morgan and Kelcye's podcast, because, they have a great point of view. And also reach out to me. I'm willing to answer any kind of questions you might have. And, cause I love this stuff. It's about the community, not about a job. All things MSP is not a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's purely a passion project. I've done it across 2 different jobs now, and I will continue to do it, until I can't do it anymore, which hopefully is a long, long time from now.
You definitely are an ally. And I know that Kelcye and I both appreciate you. And even being on here, like this is this is support. Even if if anything, this is super supportive of us. And we're really glad to be here and have people like you around, because I feel like if we didn't have people like you, and there's an entire list I could go through, but I know I wouldn't be here without the support and the mentorship and everything from the whole community. So thank you for being you.
And I know that on the podcast, you have named names, and they are all familiar names. And I totally agree with those people, because they are people who just spend a lot of time reaching out and helping the community as a whole, regardless of what position they hold in the industry.
Yeah.
All right. One more comment, Keith. I'm going to put this one last comment on here. He's telling me I'm not too old until I have to watch the podcasts in the nursing home, like he is. No, he's not watching this from the nursing home. Don't feel sorry for him. He's on his back porch with a cigar. I know that.
Good. Also, watch the podcast. Does he mean listen?
So my podcast, we actually do on video.
Oh, cool.
So we do it sort of like this. I use a different background and stuff like that. And hint, hint, I'm going to be redoing it because it's kind of plain. It's not as fun as this one. But yeah, we record that, we just don't do it live. We don't stream it. We use the same platform and everything else.
I will have to get tips on that, because it's something we've talked about, but it's just another thing to edit it's a little daunting. So if you can help me make it easy.
So the nice thing is if you use a platform, I'm using Ecamm, for example. Mm-hmm. If you use that, you really don't do any editing. You might want to cut things out, which you already do with the podcast, but everything's already here. Like if I want to put up, which by the way, I should have done in the beginning, for people to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, I can just do that. I don't have to, add it in post. If I want to remind them about the Facebook group, I can do that. So you can do all of these things. I can have different things, like if you and I were talking about a website, for example, I could go ahead and share my screen, and we could both be here on the screen while I'm sharing another screen. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. But the main thing is, it means that once you're done recording, you're not adding all of these effects and things in post. You're basically just cutting down to content like you would with the audio podcast.
That's super cool.
So
that makes it really easy.
Maybe at the next show that we're all at, I might be at Exchange, cross my fingers, in Nashville. If not, I know that I will be at ChannelCon.
Okay.
So,
I will hope to see you at Exchange.
I hope so. I really hope so. I have not been back to the Gaylord in Nashville for a long, long time. So I'm looking forward to that. And besides, Nashville, probably my favorite city, actually.
Really?
In the U.S.
Okay.
Just because I like the music. I like the music scene in Nashville. That's the part that I really, really like. We go to a lot of great places, right? Dallas frequently, LA, Chicago. Chicago's a great town too. Not a big fan of Vegas, and I lived in Orlando, so I can kind of do without the Orlando thing. But anyway, we're starting to ramble now.
It's all right. We can cut it, right?
Well, except it's live, so everybody's already seen it anyway.
Exactly.
All right. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. I think we've talked about everything, I wanted to talk about, but thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry Kelcye couldn't be here too. I know that she really wanted to, but she's at an event again this week. But thank you for just supporting us in the podcast and having us here, me here. Appreciate it.
Well, the next time that Kelcye's available, we'll try and do one with Kelcye too. Especially if you guys have something fun to announce with the podcast, that would be great. Or we could do something at a show. Like, me, I'm always carrying the camera and the microphone, so I'm always ready to record something.
I'll take you up on that. Exchange. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right. So Morgan, actually, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, but if you will hold on for a few minutes, so that we can go over, all those fun post-show things.
For sure.
All right. All right, everybody. That is another episode of All Things MSP Live. Thank you again so much for joining me here tonight. Thank you to my guest, Morgan, for being here. Really do appreciate, her taking her time out. I appreciate all of you taking your time out to watch and participate in the community. As a gentle reminder, if you're watching this on YouTube and you liked this, go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you're notified when we do more live streams or when the podcast comes out every Tuesday. Go ahead and join the Facebook group because, like I said, that's where we have more of the in-depth conversations. And that's enough. See you next time.